Admiral Zeke Thune of the Galactic Dominion Fleet stood before the massive viewing screen of his flagship, watching the small blue planet slowly rotate below. His four eyes glowed with contempt as he observed the primitive vessels that dared to patrol their own solar system. The humans had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel, and their ships looked like metal scrap compared to the elegant bioships of the Dominion. Pathetic, he clicked in his native tongue to his second-in-command, Commander Velkash. These creatures have barely crawled out of their gravity well, and they think they can negotiate with the Dominion as equals. The bridge of the Dominion dreadnought hummed with activity as junior officers monitored the human fleet movements. 300 human ships had assembled to meet the Dominion delegation, an impressive number for such a young species, but laughably small compared to the 1,000-ship armada that Zix Thune commanded. Commander Velkash's tentacles writhed with amusement. They requested a peaceful diplomatic meeting. Admiral, perhaps they understand their position and will surrender their system without resistance. Cowards always choose the easy path, Zix Thune replied, his mandibles clicking with disdain. Look at their formation. They spread their ships thin, trying to appear larger than they are. No discipline, no real military doctrine. These humans will fold the moment they see our true strength. The communication array crackled to life as the humans transmitted their message. A middle-aged human female appeared on the screen, wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. Her bearing was straight and professional, but Zix Thune could see the fear in her primitive bipedal eyes. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. We welcome you to the Sol system and hope to establish peaceful relations with the Galactic Dominion. Zix Thune allowed a predatory smile to cross his features. Admiral Chen, he responded, his voice translator making his words sound civil despite his inner contempt. I am Admiral Zix Thune. The Dominion appreciates your hospitality. However, I must inform you that this system now falls under Dominion protection. Your species will be relocated to designated worlds where you can serve the greater galactic community. The human's face hardened slightly, but she maintained her diplomatic composure. I'm afraid that's not acceptable, Admiral. Humanity claims this system by right of origin and development. We're willing to discuss trade agreements and mutual cooperation, but we will not abandon our home. Laughter echoed across the Dominion bridge. Several junior officers made clicking sounds that served as their species' equivalent of mocking amusement. Zix Thune raised a clawed hand for silence. Admiral Chen, your species has been observed for several cycles. We know of your internal conflicts, your wars among yourselves, your tendency to flee from superior forces. The Korthak Confederation provided us with detailed reports of human cowardice during their recent border skirmishes. You abandoned entire colonies rather than fight when faced with overwhelming odds. Admiral Chen's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. Those colonies were evacuated to preserve civilian lives. We don't consider protecting non-combatants to be cowardice. Semantic games, Zix Thune dismissed. Your military doctrine is based on retreat and evasion. The hegemony of Vel reported similar observations. When faced with superior technology and numbers, humans consistently choose flight over fight. It's understandable for such a young species, but it makes your current posturing amusing. The human admiral exchanged glances with someone off-screen. When she looked back, something had changed in her expression. The diplomatic mask remained, but underneath, Zix Thune detected something that surprised him. Not fear, but a cold calculation that seemed oddly intense for such a supposedly cowardly species. Admiral Zix Thune, I think there may be some misunderstanding about human nature. Those previous encounters you mentioned involved civilian populations and merchant vessels. You haven't met our military forces under optimal conditions. Your threats ring hollow, Admiral. We've analyzed your ship designs, your weapon systems, your tactical databases that we acquired during those previous encounters. Human technology is centuries behind Dominion standards. Your largest ships barely qualify as destroyers by our classifications. Accept relocation peacefully, and your species will be treated well in the labor worlds. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, Her tone had shifted from diplomatic to something that reminded Thun uncomfortably of the voice predators used just before striking. "Admiral, I'm going to give you one opportunity to reconsider your position. Withdraw your fleet from this system within 72 hours, and we'll pretend this conversation never happened. Continue with your current course of action, and we'll be forced to defend ourselves." The bridge erupted in chittering laughter from the Dominion crew. Thun allowed them their amusement before responding. "Defend yourselves? With what? Your primitive kinetic weapons? Your crude nuclear devices? Admiral Chen, your entire species possesses less firepower than a single Dominion battle group. Your threats are not just empty, they're absurd." "Perhaps," Chen replied quietly. "But you should know that those previous encounters you mentioned, those weren't with our military. They were with civilians, traders, and colonists. You've never actually fought human soldiers, and what difference could that possibly make? Your warriors are still human, still limited by your primitive technology and cowardly nature." Admiral Chen smiled, and for the first time since the conversation began, Thun felt a small stirring of unease. There was something predatory in that expression, something that didn't match the intelligence reports about human behavior. "The difference, Admiral, is that every one of those civilians and traders you terrorized, they had families, friends, children. And some of those children grew up to become soldiers. Specifically, they became members of a rather specialized unit that we've kept in reserve for situations exactly like this." "More empty threats," Thun scoffed, but his confidence had wavered slightly. "We call them the American Boogeymen," Chen continued, her smile growing colder. "They've been requesting a deployment for quite some time. Something about settling old debts with alien aggressors who prey on human civilians." Velkash leaned closer to the Admiral's command station. "Sir, this designation doesn't appear in any of our intelligence files about human military units." Chen seemed to hear the whispered comment. "Of course it doesn't. They're not listed in any public databases. They don't officially exist, but I assure you, Admiral Thun, they are very real, and they are very eager to make your acquaintance. Human psychological warfare is as primitive as your technology," Thun replied, though he found himself studying the human admiral's face more carefully. "Mythical units and bogeyman stories will not save your species from the reality of Dominion supremacy." 72 hours, Chen repeated. "After that, the boogeymen will come calling. And, Admiral, when they do, you'll understand why every other intelligent species in this galaxy has learned to avoid certain coordinates in space, the ones where American boogeymen have operated." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Dominion bridge in uncomfortable silence. Thun stared at the blank screen, his mind processing the human's words. There had been something in her tone, something that spoke of absolute confidence rather than desperate bluffing. "Commander Velkash, Contact Intelligence Division. I want every available file on human military capabilities, specifically any references to this American Boogeymen unit." "Already initiated, sir. But our databases show no record of any such designation. Human military structure appears to be standard for their development level. Conventional forces, predictable tactics, nothing that would suggest any specialized capabilities." Thun clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Perhaps the humans are more cunning than we credited them, using misdirection to buy time for evacuation or surrender negotiations. That would be consistent with their established behavioral patterns, sir. Deception and delay tactics are common among species that lack the strength for direct confrontation. Prepare the fleet for orbital bombardment. If the humans want to play psychological games, we'll demonstrate the futility of such tactics. Target their major population centers and industrial facilities. A few demonstrations should convince them to be more reasonable." The bridge crew began implementing targeting protocols, their efficient movements reflecting the confidence that came from overwhelming superiority. The Dominion had conquered hundreds of systems using these exact tactics. Young species always blustered and threatened before accepting the inevitable. But as the hours passed, Thun found himself returning repeatedly to the viewing screen, studying the human fleet positions. Their formations had shifted subtly, pulling back from the inner system while maintaining a defensive perimeter. Standard retreat positioning. Exactly what he would expect from a cowardly species facing superior forces. Yet something about their movement patterns nagged at him. The withdrawal wasn't chaotic or panicked. It was measured, deliberate, almost as if they were clearing space for something rather than simply fleeing. "Sir," Communications Officer Threndal reported, his voice carrying a note of confusion. "We're detecting unusual energy signatures from the outer system. Multiple sources, but they don't match any known human technology." "Clarify," Zixthuan commanded, moving to the sensor station. "The signatures are difficult to classify, sir. They appear to be ships, but their energy profiles don't match anything in our databases. They're not human designs, but they're operating in coordination with human forces." Commander Velkash joined them at the sensor station, his tentacles writhing with concern. Could the humans have alien allies? Other species providing technological assistance? "Impossible," Zixthun replied automatically. "Our intelligence confirms that humans have had no contact with other spacefaring civilizations prior to recent Dominion encounters. They lack the diplomatic connections to secure military alliances." But even as he spoke, the Admiral felt a growing sense of unease. The energy signatures were indeed unusual, unlike anything the Dominion had encountered in their centuries of expansion. More troubling was the fact that they were appearing in perfect coordination with human fleet movements. "Admiral," Threndal continued, "the signatures are multiplying. Current count shows 47 distinct energy sources, all approaching from the outer system boundary." Zixthuan studied the tactical display with growing concern. The approaching signatures moved with purpose and coordination that suggested advanced military discipline. Their formation patterns were sophisticated, displaying tactical knowledge that seemed inconsistent with humanity's supposed technological limitations. "Time to contact?" he asked. "At current velocity, approximately 18 hours until they reach engagement range with our forward elements." The Admiral considered his options. The mysterious signatures could represent anything from hidden human technology to actual alien intervention. Either possibility suggested that his intelligence about human capabilities was incomplete. "Signal the fleet. All ships to battle stations. I want full tactical scans of those approaching signatures. If the humans have surprises waiting for us, we need to understand what we're facing." As the Dominion fleet prepared for potential combat, Admiral Zixthun couldn't shake the memory of Admiral Chen's confident smile. There had been something in her expression, something that suggested she knew exactly what was coming. The mention of American boogeymen began to take on a more ominous significance as the mysterious energy signatures continued their steady approach toward the Sol system. The first indication that Admiral Zixthun's assumptions about human cowardice might be flawed came exactly 72 hours after Admiral Chen's ultimatum. The mysterious energy signatures had resolved into something far more disturbing than any Dominion officer had anticipated. "Sir." Communications Officer. Threndal's voice carried an unmistakable note of alarm. "The approaching signatures have just appeared throughout our formation. They bypassed our sensor network completely." Zixthuan's 4 eyes focused instantly on the tactical display, his confidence evaporating as he processed what he was seeing. Where moments before his 1,000-ship armada had maintained perfect formation in the void between Mars and Jupiter, now strange vessels had materialized at seemingly impossible positions throughout the Dominion fleet. "How many?" he demanded. "Initial count shows 47 vessels, sir. But Admiral..." Threndal paused, his communication tendrils trembling with confusion. "They're not where they should be. According to our tracking, they were still 18 hours out. These ships just materialized inside our defensive perimeter." Commander Velkash studied the readings with growing concern. "Sir, this technology, instantaneous movement without detectable transition signatures, this is beyond anything in our databases. Even the elder races abandoned this system because the technology was considered too dangerous." Zixthuan studied the tactical display more carefully. The new vessels were unlike anything he'd seen in his 3 centuries of military service. They appeared to be constructed from some sort of dark metal that seemed to absorb sensor waves rather than reflect them. Their designs were angular, predatory, and somehow conveyed an impression of barely contained violence. Size classifications? He asked. That's problematic, sir. The vessels appear to range from frigate to cruiser class by volume, but their mass readings are inconsistent with their apparent size. Energy signatures suggest power cores far beyond what ships of that tonnage should be able to mount. The Admiral's mandibles clicked nervously. Weapons, systems? Unknown, sir. We're detecting energy buildups consistent with charging weapons, but the signatures don't match anything in our databases. Whatever they're carrying, it's not based on any known technology. A new voice crackled over the communication system, speaking in clear, unaccented galactic standard. The voice was human, but unlike Admiral Chen's diplomatic tones, this speaker's words carried the flat, emotionless quality of someone accustomed to delivering death. Dominion Fleet, this is Colonel James McCready, commanding officer of the 1st Battalion, American Boogeymen. You were given 72 hours to withdraw from this system. That time has expired. Zix Thune activated the response channel, fighting to keep his voice steady. Colonel McCready, I am Admiral Zix Thune of the Galactic Dominion. Your vessels have committed an act of aggression by penetrating our formation without authorization. Withdraw immediately, or face the consequences. A sound came over the communication channel that chilled every being on the Dominion bridge. It was laughter, but not the chittering amusement of civilized species. This was the deep, predatory laughter of something that found the prospect of violence genuinely entertaining. Admiral, I think you misunderstand our position. We're not here to negotiate. We're here to collect on debts owed to dead civilians. Every human colonist your allies killed, every traitor your Confederates murdered, every child orphaned by your expansion. They all get a vote today. And they all voted the same way. 200, 200, 200, 202,000 row. 202,000 round. Your threats are meaningless. Zix Thune replied, though he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. You are outnumbered, 23-1. Surrender now, and your crews will be treated according to galactic conventions. 23-1, McCready mused. In our experience, Admiral, those odds favor us. You see, your intelligence about human cowardice was based on encounters with civilians. Today you get to meet actual soldiers, American soldiers. And we've been looking forward to this conversation for a very long time. The communication channel switched to a broader frequency, and suddenly every Dominion ship in the fleet could hear McCready's voice. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted from conversational to something that made trained warriors across 1,000 ships suddenly check their weapon readiness. Attention Dominion Fleet. My name is Colonel James McCready. My unit specializes in teaching lessons to alien species who believe humans are easy prey. Today's lesson is simple. There are no cowards in the United States military. There are only varying degrees of lethality. Zix Thune cut the channel and turned to his tactical officer. Target the nearest enemy vessel. Full spread, maximum yield. Show these humans what Dominion firepower can accomplish. The order was transmitted instantly. The Dominion battleship Times Hegemony's Pride Times rotated its massive plasma cannon arrays toward the closest Boogeyman vessel. A dark, angular ship that hung motionless in space roughly 2,000 kilometers off their starboard flank. The plasma discharge lit up the void between the two ships, a coherent beam of superheated matter that could punch through planetary crust. It struck the mysterious vessel dead center, and for a moment, the Dominion bridge crew allowed themselves to believe that human arrogance had been appropriately answered. Then, the plasma beam simply stopped. Not deflected or absorbed, but terminated, as if it had encountered something that refused to acknowledge the beam's existence. Impossible, Commander Velkash whispered. Nothing can simply negate a plasma discharge of that magnitude. The dark ship rotated slowly, presenting what was obviously a weapons array toward Time's Hegemony's Pride asterisk. When it fired, there was no visible discharge, no energy beam, no missile trail. One moment the Dominion battleship was intact and operational. The next moment, it simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not blown apart, but erased as completely as if it had never been built. The communication channel crackled back to life with MacCready's voice, still carrying that same conversational tone. That was a demonstration, Admiral. The weapon that just erased your battleship operates on principles your species hasn't discovered yet. We call it a reality editor. It simply removes the target from existence by convincing the universe that the target was never there. Zixthun stared at the empty space where one of his most powerful ships had been floating moments before. That's impossible. The energy requirements alone. Admiral, you've spent so much time conquering primitive civilizations that you've forgotten something important. Humans didn't develop in isolation. We've been fighting each other for millennia. Every weapon you can imagine, we've built. Every tactic you can conceive, we've tested in combat against other humans. And when we finally achieved spaceflight, we brought all of that accumulated knowledge with us. Another Boogeyman vessel moved with fluid grace through the Dominion formation. And 3 more Dominion ships simply vanished from existence. No explosions, no debris fields, just empty space where proud warships had been moments before. The reality editors are just one tool in our arsenal, MacCready continued, his voice taking on the tone of a professor lecturing students. We also have temporal disruptors that age ships into scrap in seconds. Quantum entanglement bombs that destroy their targets by convincing them they're actually antimatter, and dimensional shifters that move enemy vessels into pocket universes where they can contemplate their mistakes in private. Zixthun's tactical display showed chaos as his fleet tried to respond to an enemy that seemed to ignore every law of physics. Dominion ships fired frantically at targets that phased in and out of normal space, while the Boogeyman vessels moved through his formation like predators through a flock of frightened prey. "How?" he transmitted, his voice barely above a whisper. MacCready's reply came immediately. "You want to know our secret, Admiral? It's simple. Humans don't fight fair. We cheat. We lie. We use every dirty trick and underhanded tactic we can devise. And when we're facing an enemy that threatens our families, we don't just try to win. We try to win so completely that the enemy's descendants will learn our name as a cautionary tale." A new type of weapon discharge lit up the void as one of the Boogeyman ships engaged a cluster of Dominion destroyers. Instead of energy beams or kinetic projectiles, it launched what appeared to be clouds of metallic dust. When the dust made contact with the Dominion vessels, it began consuming them from the outside in, converting their hull material into more dust that spread to nearby ships. Self-replicating nanomachines, MacCready explained helpfully. They're programmed to convert any non-human technology they encounter into more copies of themselves. Don't worry. They'll stop replicating once they've consumed your entire fleet. We're very careful about runaway scenarios. Commander Velkash gripped his command console with all 4 arms as he watched half his destroyer squadron dissolve into expanding clouds of microscopic machines. "Admiral, we need to retreat. This isn't a battle, it's an execution." "Retreat?" Zixthun's voice cracked. "Where? How do we retreat from enemies that can appear anywhere instantly?" His question was answered as the remaining Dominion ships attempted to engage their faster-than-light drives. Instead of the smooth transition to hyperspace that they expected, the ships found themselves held in place by some invisible force. "We've deployed spatial anchors throughout this system," MacCready announced. "Nothing leaves without our permission. This is now a closed system until we decide otherwise. And we haven't decided otherwise yet." The massacre continued with methodical precision. Boogeyman vessels demonstrated weapon after weapon that operated on principles beyond Dominion understanding. Ships were trapped in temporal loops that aged them into dust. Others were translated into parallel dimensions where different laws of physics applied. Some simply had their atomic bonds convinced to reorganize themselves into more aesthetically pleasing configurations. Through it all, MacCready maintained his running commentary, describing each weapon system as if he were conducting an educational demonstration rather than orchestrating the destruction of a 1,000-ship armada. The quantum uncertainty cannons work by increasing the probability that enemy ships will spontaneously disassemble themselves at the molecular level. It's based on the principle that anything that can happen will happen, given enough encouragement. The consciousness transfer beams move enemy crew minds into specially prepared virtual realities where they can experience life as their former victims. It's educational and therapeutic. The causality inverters make it so that enemy ships were destroyed before they were built. It's very effective, though the paperwork is a nightmare. Admiral Zeke Thuan watched his magnificent fleet reduced to scattered debris and expanding dust clouds, while the Boogeyman vessels moved through the carnage without taking a single hit. His remaining ships couldn't even target the enemy effectively. Their sensors registered the enemy vessels as existing in several different dimensions simultaneously. "Colonel MacCready," he transmitted, his voice hoarse with defeat. "What do you want? What will it take for you to stop this slaughter?" The communication channel was quiet for a long moment before MacCready's voice returned, now carrying a note of satisfaction that was somehow more terrifying than his earlier casual tone. "Admiral, we want you to go home. We want you to tell every species in your galactic dominion exactly what happened here. We want you to explain to them that humans aren't cowards, they're just selective about when they choose to fight. And most importantly, we want you to make it very clear that any species that harms human civilians will eventually receive a visit from the American Boogeymen." The surviving Dominion ships suddenly found their FTL drives functional again as the spatial anchors disengaged. Of the 1,000 ships that had entered the Sol system with such confidence, fewer than 50 remained operational. "You have 10 minutes to leave this system," MacCready announced. "After that, we'll assume you want to continue the educational demonstration." The surviving ships of Admiral Zeke Thuan's once mighty fleet limped through hyperspace toward Dominion space, carrying with them a message that would fundamentally alter the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The Admiral himself sat in his command chair, staring at damage reports that defied comprehension. In less than 4 hours, the most advanced military force in known space had been reduced to a handful of traumatized survivors. But the true horror of what they had witnessed went beyond mere military defeat. The weapons the American Boogeymen had deployed violated every scientific principle the Dominion understood: reality editors, temporal disruptors, dimensional shifters. These weren't just advanced technology. They were proof that humanity had mastered aspects of physics that other species considered impossible. Commander Velkash approached the Admiral's station, his tentacles drooping with exhaustion and shock. "Sir, the crew is requesting answers. They want to understand what they witnessed." Zeke Thuan's 4 eyes focused on his second-in-command with difficulty. The battle had lasted only hours, but he felt as if he had aged decades. "What answers can I give them, Commander? That everything we thought we knew about humans was wrong? That our intelligence was not just incomplete, but fundamentally flawed? Perhaps, sir, perhaps we can report that humans had alien assistance, advanced technology from the elder races, or intervention from an unknown species." The Admiral considered this suggestion, knowing that it would provide a comfortable explanation for the crew and the Dominion leadership. But the memory of Colonel MacCready's voice haunted him. There had been something distinctly human about the way the Boogeymen fought. Not just the technology, but the mindset behind it. The casual cruelty, the educational tone, the systematic demonstration of overwhelming superiority. "No, Commander. What we witnessed was purely human. They told us exactly what they were doing and why. They wanted us to understand that we had encountered humans as they truly are, not as we assumed them to be." The communication panel activated, displaying an incoming priority transmission from Dominion High Command. The image of Supreme Admiral Korthex materialized, his crystalline carapace reflecting his barely contained fury. "Admiral Zeke Thuan, explain your status immediately. Our monitoring stations detected massive energy discharges from the Sol system, followed by the emergency retreat of your fleet. What is your tactical assessment?" Zeke Thuan straightened in his chair, knowing that his next words would change everything. "Supreme Admiral, I must report total tactical failure. The human species possesses military capabilities far beyond our intelligence estimates. My fleet has been effectively destroyed." The Supreme Admiral's crystalline structure flickered with disbelief. "Impossible. Human technology is centuries behind our capabilities. Clarify your statement immediately." "Sir, human military technology is not centuries behind us. It appears to be centuries ahead of us." They deployed weapons systems that operate on principles we don't understand, using energy sources we can't identify. They demonstrated capabilities that we consider scientifically impossible. Supreme Admiral Corthex leaned forward, his image distorting slightly through the long-range transmission. Are you suggesting that a species that achieved spaceflight less than a century ago has somehow surpassed Dominion science? I'm suggesting, sir, that our fundamental assumptions about human development were incorrect. The species we encountered today was not the primitive civilization described in our intelligence reports. These humans have mastered technologies that allow them to edit reality, manipulate time, and traverse dimensions at will. The Supreme Admiral was silent for a long moment, processing this impossible information. Admiral, you will submit your complete tactical logs for analysis. If what you're claiming is true, this represents a threat to the very existence of the Dominion. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. Zixthun knew that within hours, his report would reach every level of Dominion command, triggering emergency sessions and tactical reassessments. But more importantly, word would spread throughout the galactic community. Other species would hear what had happened to the mighty Dominion fleet, and they would draw their own conclusions. 3 months later, the ripple effects of what became known as the Sol Incident had transformed galactic politics completely. Species that had spent centuries under Dominion protection began reconsidering their alliances. Trade routes were rerouted to avoid human space, not out of fear, but out of respect for a species that had proven itself capable of defending its interests with unprecedented effectiveness. The Korthak Confederation, which had provided the initial intelligence about human cowardice, found themselves facing an internal revolution as their own military questioned why they had antagonized such a dangerous species. The hegemony of Vel quietly withdrew from all territories adjacent to human-controlled space, claiming economic factors while secretly fearing that their previous raids on human merchants might be remembered. In the depths of Dominion space, xenobiologist Dr. Shentar studied the tactical recordings from Admiral Zixthun's encounter with growing fascination and horror. The weapons systems deployed by the American Boogeymen represented not just technological advancement, but a fundamental understanding of reality that challenged every scientific principle her species had developed. The reality editors alone suggested that humans had somehow learned to manipulate the basic programming of the universe itself. The temporal weapons indicated mastery of time that even the legendary elder races had never achieved. Most disturbing of all was the casual manner in which these weapons had been deployed, as if they were standard equipment rather than miraculous breakthroughs. But as Dr. Shentar delved deeper into the recordings, she began to understand something that military analysts had missed. The technology wasn't the most significant aspect of the encounter. The truly terrifying element was the psychology behind it. The American Boogeymen hadn't just defeated the Dominion fleet. They had educated them. Every weapon demonstration had been accompanied by detailed explanations, as if the humans wanted their enemies to understand exactly how outmatched they were. This wasn't the behavior of a species defending itself. This was the behavior of a species delivering a message to the entire galaxy. We are not what you think we are, and underestimating us has consequences. The message had been received with crystal clarity. Within 6 months of the Sol Incident, human space had become an untouchable zone. Ships that approached human territory found themselves escorted by mysterious vessels that appeared from nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. No hostile actions were taken, but the message was unmistakable. Humans were watching, and they were prepared. Colonel McCready stood in the command center of the stealth station that monitored galactic communications, watching intelligence reports flow across multiple screens. The operation had been more successful than anyone had dared hope. Not only had they neutralized the immediate Dominion threat, but they had fundamentally altered humanity's position in galactic politics. Sir, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Admiral Chen's daughter, approached with a datapad containing the latest intelligence summaries. Galactic shipping has begun, voluntarily avoiding human trade routes. Several species have initiated diplomatic overtures requesting non-aggression pacts. The Dominion itself has classified human space as a no-approach zone. McCready smiled, remembering the terror in Admiral Zixthun's voice as he witnessed the destruction of his fleet. Good. Fear is useful, But respect is better. They're learning that humans aren't cowards or victims. We're predators who simply prefer not to hunt unless provoked. The colonel moved to a different monitor showing long-range sensor readings from the galactic core. Any word from the other Boogeyman units? The 2nd Battalion reports successful deployment in the vegan sector. 3 different species have withdrawn military forces from human colonies after receiving educational demonstrations. The 3rd Battalion's psychological warfare campaign in the Centauri region has been equally effective. MacCready nodded with satisfaction. The American Boogeymen weren't just a single unit. They were a distributed network of specialists trained to operate in the gray areas between conventional warfare and strategic deterrence. Each battalion specialized in different forms of technological intimidation, but all shared the same mission: convince the galaxy that humans were too dangerous to threaten. The beauty of our approach, he mused, is that we didn't have to lie about our capabilities. Everything we demonstrated was real. The reality editors, the temporal weapons, the dimensional shifters. We actually built all of that. Lieutenant Chen looked up from her reports with curiosity. Sir, how is that possible? Human science was supposed to be centuries behind alien technology. MacCready's smile grew predatory. That's the fundamental mistake every alien species makes when they encounter humans, Lieutenant. They assume that because we achieved spaceflight recently, we must be primitive in every area. They don't understand that humans have been conducting advanced theoretical research for centuries. We solved most of these technological problems on paper long before we had the industrial base to build the hardware. He gestured to the displays, showing weapon system schematics. Einstein gave us the foundation for reality manipulation in 1905. Heisenberg provided the framework for quantum uncertainty weapons in 1927. Tesla was experimenting with dimensional resonance in the 1890 seconds. We just needed the resources and motivation to transform theory into practice. The lieutenant studied the complex equations scrolling across multiple screens. And the motivation came from, quote, from watching alien species prey on human civilians for decades while treating us like helpless primitives, MacCready replied, his voice hardening. Every human colony that was abandoned, every merchant ship that was destroyed, every family that was killed or enslaved, they all contributed to a simple equation. Humanity needed to be feared rather than pitied. A new alert appeared on the communication board, indicating an incoming transmission from Earth. MacCready activated the secure channel, revealing the familiar face of Admiral Sarah Chen. Colonel, I'm pleased to report that the Security Council has approved Operation Deterrent for full implementation. All Boogeyman units are authorized to engage in proactive demonstrations of human capabilities. Understood, Admiral. What are our new operational parameters? Simple, Colonel. We want every species in this galaxy to understand that humans are not victims waiting to be conquered. We're the apex predators who have been pretending to be herbivores out of politeness. That pretense ends now. Admiral Chen's image flickered slightly before continuing. The President has authorized me to share our ultimate objective with you. We're not just protecting human space, Colonel. We're preparing to demonstrate to the entire galaxy what happens when humans stop pretending to be civilized. MacCready felt a familiar surge of satisfaction as he contemplated the implications. Humanity had spent centuries fighting each other, developing weapons and tactics that no alien species could imagine. Now, with external threats forcing them to unite, humans could finally demonstrate what they were truly capable of when they stopped holding back. Admiral, I believe the galaxy is about to receive a comprehensive education in human nature. And like all good educational programs, the lessons will be unforgettable. The transmission ended, leaving MacCready alone with his thoughts and the knowledge that humanity's true war was just beginning. Not a war of conquest or expansion, but a war of perception. A campaign to ensure that no species would ever again make the mistake of believing that humans were cowards. In the months that followed, reports began filtering through galactic communication networks of entire star systems, declaring themselves neutral zones rather than risk human attention. The mere rumor that American Boogeymen might be operating in a region was enough to cause aggressive species to withdraw and begin peace negotiations. Admiral Zix Thuan, now retired and living in exile on a remote Dominion colony, spent his days writing detailed reports that no one in authority wanted to read. His accounts of humanity's true nature were classified and buried, deemed too dangerous for general circulation. But word spread anyway, carried by the survivors of his fleet, who told anyone who would listen about the day they learned that humans weren't the prey species they had thought. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humans weren't cowards. They were simply selective about when they chose to remind the universe exactly what they were capable of. And once that lesson was learned, it was never forgotten.